Hello everyone, this is Heroes Trivia, and welcome back to our 7-year reign of Talpi Let's Talk Lore series as we continue with episode 5 titled Change, Mutiny, and New Blood. So in our last few episodes, we discussed many of Talpi's political reforms, but no amount of court restructuring can ensure the survival of a new dynasty, as in chaotic times, only raw strength can ensure one's survival. Therefore, the control of the military is of the utmost importance, and for Talpi and the young Wei dynasty, there were a multitude of internal and external problems. Now, the external problems are blatantly obvious, as you had Liu Bei waving the Han Restoration banner in the Shuba region, and Sun Quan down south, who clearly sees himself as a challenger and an equal despite pledging himself as a vassal to Wei. But what is less apparent were the threats within, especially following the death of Cao Cao, as he was the undisputed and charismatic leader that the army followed and obeyed. And immediately after Cao Cao passed away, before Talpi was even able to accept the abdication from Emperor Liu Xie, the Qingzhou Army Corps openly quit. Now for those who don't remember, the Qingzhou Army Corps were former Yellow Turban rebels from the Qing province after fighting a young Cao Cao to a standstill back in the winter of 192. The two sides compromised as Cao Cao promised to resettle the majority of the Qingzhou rebels on his Tuntian farms and provide them with safety and supplies in return for their service during times of war. And given that many of these later period Yellow Turban remnants were essentially displaced refugees that merely used the Yellow Turban banner, compared to the original cult-like followers of the Zhang brothers, and in a sense, the Qingzhou Army Corps became the early backbone of Cao Cao's army, both in terms of providing manpower and crops. And thus, for the next 28 years, the Qingzhou Army Corps served Cao Cao faithfully, as the original 300,000 displaced population provided an endless stream of conscripts, while over 60% of their crop yield also went to supply Cao Cao's endless campaigns. So once Cao Cao was dead, they collectively quit, as in those 28 years of service, fathers fought and died, and then their sons picked up their mantle, and with China no closer to being united, the Qingzhou Army Corps saw Cao Cao's death as their only escape. And facing a mutiny of such a scale, Cao Pi's first instinct was to put down the Qingzhou Army Corps. But after advice from court official Jia Kui, who suggested that maintaining peace and order during the transition of power is vital to the stability of the newly found dynasty. So instead of punishing the Qingzhou Army Corps for abandoning their Tuntian contracts, Jia Kui convinced Cao Pi to let them go back to their homeland in the Qing province. Jia Kui even went as far as handing out passes to the Qingzhou Army Corps to allow those who have need to draw food and supplies from the cities and towns on their journey back to the Qing province. And while you might think that this was purely an act of kindness, in reality, this move was to ensure that the Qingzhou Army Corps didn't have any excuse to loot their way from Luoyang to the Qing province. And if certain individuals did loot or break the law on their migration home, then with these passes handed out, Jia Kui could punish those lawbreakers without upsetting the rest. And speaking of Jia Kui, while many of you might not know his name, I'm certain you know his son Jia Chong's name from Dynasty Warrior series, and we will one day have a full Let's Talk lore on Jia Kui, who alongside his son plays an instrumental role in the histories of both the Wei and Jin dynasty, which will follow, but for the sake of time and relevance, today is not that day. Instead, with the Qingzhou Army Corps mutiny out of the way, the next big test for Cao Pi was the changing of the guards, as by 220, many of the old guards that had served Cao Cao were also on their last legs. Of the later named 5 elites in Zhang Liao, Yue Jin, Yu Jin, Zhang He, and Xu Huang. Yue Jin had already passed away of old age in 218. Yu Jin would soon follow in 221, not long after being ransomed back from Sun Quan. And finally, Zhang Liao would also pass away to old age in 222. And of the generals related to Cao Cao and Cao Pi, Xia Houdun would pass away to old age in 220, just 3 months after Cao Cao's passing. Then Cao Pi's uncle, Cao Ren, and his brother, Cao Zhang, would also both pass away to natural causes in 223. Jia Xu, who was Cao Pi's first Grand Commandant, would pass away in 223 at the age of 77, as he leaves Cao Pi with the advice to strengthen the kingdom first from within before launching campaigns against Wu and Shu. And with so many death and aging generals, Cao Pi had to give his armies a change of blood, as we'll see the likes of Cao Xiu, Cao Zhen, and Xia Houshang elevated in the early days of Cao Pi's reign, as much like his father, Cao Pi trusted his relatives and in-laws, especially when it came to matters of the military. Now, just because Jia Xu had advised Cao Pi to strengthen the kingdom from within first, it didn't mean that Cao Pi didn't commit to external campaigns. Throughout Cao Pi's 7-year reign, 3 campaigns were launched against Wu, 1 campaign against Shu, and 3 campaigns targeting nomadic tribes in the north took place. Of these 7 campaigns, the Shu campaign happened first, as it was the follow-up fight from Guan Yu's attack on the Jin province, as Meng Da and Shen Dan betrayed Liu Feng and flipped sides to join Xia Houshang and Xu Huang's army, as Wei was able to retake the Shangyong commandery. Then in 222, with Sun Quan refusing to send his sons as hostage to Luoyang, Cao Pi launched his largest campaign under his reign, with a 3-pronged attack on Wu. Now, in our Battle of Yiling lore series, we already talked about some of the Wei gains in this campaign. So let's focus on how Wu saved themselves, as the early periods of this attack didn't look very good for them. On the western front, the siege of Jiangling, led by Cao Zhen, Xia Houshang, Zhang He, and Xu Huang, got off to a great start, as 2 reinforcement attempts by Wu were soundly defeated, with Sun Sheng leading the first effort by land, and Zhuge Jin leading the second effort by sea. Yet, despite maintaining a full siege on the city for 6 months, all while building dirt rams, constructing arrow towers, and sapping the city wall, Jiangling stood strong under the command of Zhu Ran. Then, just as the city started to run out of food, a plague broke out in the region that hampered the Wei army, and with Sun Quan resuming tributes and pleading for peace not long after, the siege was finally lifted as the Wei forces retreated without making any material gains. And despite this stalemate, both Cao Zhen on the Wei side and Zhu Ran on the Wu side were praised for their accomplishments in this siege battle, as both elevated their own status and rank within their respective armies. Now on the eastern front is where the wheels fell off for the Wei attack, as Cao Ren led the attack on the Wu military port at Ruxukou. Armed with an army roughly 30,000 in size, Cao Ren outnumbered the Ruxukou commander Zhu Huan 3-1. And not only did Cao Ren have the numbers advantage, General Jiang Ji, leading a separate army, was able to strike at another nearby Wu position prior to the start of Cao Ren's attack, which ended up forcing Zhu Huan to send another 5,000 men to fend off Jiang Ji's attack. This left Zhu Huan with only 5,000 men at Ruxukou. But Cao Ren would overreach in his attack, as he tried to do too much, as he first sent half of his army, under the command of his son, Cao Tai, to siege Ruxukou, with a 3-1 numbers advantage. Then he also sent his generals Chang Diao with 5,000 men in oil ships to try to sneak around Ru Xukou to attack Zhongzhou, where Zhu Huan had kept his family and the families of all his troops. Cao Ren himself stayed behind with 10,000 men in reserve. And once these plans were made, Jiang Ji, who was nearby, tried to warn Cao Ren that diverting a naval force deep into Wu territory was both unnecessary and a potential danger to their plan. But Cao Ren didn't listen, as the siege began with Zhu Huan diverting his navy to stall Cao Ren's sneak attack behind, as he then rallied his remaining men to defend the city against Cao Tai's attack. Now you have to understand that Ru Xukou, which sits directly south of Hefei, was Wu's very own Hefei castle, meant to act as the first line of defense against the Wei forces. And aside from Cao Cao's one successful campaign that took the city in 217, this city has been largely unassailable, much like Hefei. So after a 3-month siege assault, Cao Tai's unit were beaten back, as Zhu Huan now had the time to turn his forces on the Wei naval sneak attack behind his line. And now with no way of reaching them, Cao Ren could only look on as his 5,000 men were slaughtered on the river, with General Chang Diao and Lieutenant Zhuge Qian both killed in action, along with a little under 2,000 men, while Lieutenant Wang Shuang and 3,000 more were captured alive by Wu. And with these losses and the losses suffered by his son Cao Tai during the siege, Cao Ren could no longer continue his attack, as he became the only Wu front to lose in this coordinated attack on Wu, which played a role in Cao Pi's decision to ultimately accept Sun Quan's peace terms. And sadly, this defeat would also be Cao Ren's final campaign, as he would end up dying of old age at 56, just a year after this campaign ended, which paved the way for generals like Jiang Ji and Cao Xiu to ultimately take command over the Eastern Front. So with that, our episode comes to an end, as we have discussed much of the early military actions under Cao Pi's reign, and the changing of the guards within the Wei military as well. Next time, we'll continue to discuss the remaining military actions that occurred under Cao Pi's reign, including 2 more campaigns against Wu, and a multitude of military actions in the north, which will see the restoration of the Silk Road. So hopefully you all enjoyed this episode enough to hit that like button to help support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!